society. The first time I saw poverty, that was in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, I did research, and I did a research in how do street children cope in society. What I saw was that they were victims of organ rape, robbery, of rape. They were trying to make a living, and it was very, very difficult for people just to do something in society over there, because they were totally excluded. So besides that people didn't have a lot of money, there was something else going on. And I learned that after a few months living with them and begging with them on the streets, I learned I have to do something else. Because society over there excludes some groups of people. So what did I do? Sharing water. So I tried to pick out in society some of the high Japanese, middle Japanese class people, and low Japanese, the street children. And I put them in water together. So they were connected by the water together. What happened is after a while, after a few weeks, they were used to being in the same water as other classes. They still didn't have more money. They still were poor. But yet they were rich in comparison to many other groups of low Japanese. Namely, they had some role in society and they dared trying to connect with other groups of people. So they were more a part and more rich of society than other groups. So, back to Holland. After my research over there, I came to Holland, and well, I thought we don't have poverty over here. But, for instance, here in the city of Leeuwarden, we have about 6,000 households that don't have a lot of money, huge debts, and they have to go to charity to get some food. Also, what about participation for these groups? Well, first, in the beginning of this century, it wasn't really necessary, we thought, to give them like a role in society and let them participate. But especially in 2010, nationally, there was this paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift was initiated by the NIBUD, that's the Budget Management Institute, gives advice, and the Social Cultural Planning Agency. And what they did was look at groups of people and see whether they were participating in society, because poverty was not only that you have a few euros to spend, but also what's your role in society. And what they came up with was, after research and focus groups, what is the minimum a person would need per month in order to participate more. And it's, well, discutable, because if you look, you see 83 euros per month is necessary to do something. But the focus group said, well, a pet, that's luxury. So people don't need a pet to participate. People need to go on a holiday sometimes, but only off-season and only in Holland. And sometimes it's good to go to a birthday party, and you have to celebrate one yourself, or you have to go there, and well, about 5 euros for a small present is enough. So that's like a minimum level of participation. So after this participation story of poverty and the poverty definition, that this is important for people, they also did something else, which is quite interesting. They found that in the last decades, we defined poverty in households. So groups of people living together. What does a household of 1970 had to deserve to cope in 1970, and they indexed that amount to 2011, for example. And so you had like this classical household, which was projected from 1970 to nowadays. And that was how much you needed. But also in 2010 they changed that. And now poverty is not a household connected, but individually. And that's a lot better because there are people living in a household and one of them might be rather poor in spending but also in participation, and others have a beautiful life and do stuff together. But also you see that Dutch society and Frisian society is changing. It's getting more and more individual. So that's quite an interesting paradigm shift, and it made the definition of poverty more interesting. But what are we doing here? We are thinking about Friesland in 2080, maybe the 22nd century. And what happens? Well, we see that if you look also at the poverty definitions, that society is getting more and more complex. Back to Java, if you see people living in the slums, then you're not living in a rather complex society if you look at participation, because, well, there are hardly any jobs, you have to beg, and living is complex, and surviving is complex. But there are hardly any high complexities that we in the Western world know. Also, of course, Indonesia is a Western world, but the areas of people living in slums and living on the streets, those are sub-societies. That's so different from regular society. So what we see is that the complexity of society is going up and up. We tend to go to a knowledge industry and a knowledge economy. And in a knowledge economy, you see that there are more complex jobs. The education goes higher. And again, what we learned in 2010, what happens about participation? If you look at more high-skilled persons, they are finding the economy and the evolvement of the economy rather interesting. They think there's more challenge for me. There is more playing field for me. I can do so much more. But there is also a group that have rather low skills, and they get stuck in the high complexity sometimes. Those are in the lower right grid of this grid. In the lower left grid, you see people, well, maybe they have not a lot of skills, but yet they can cope, because they are also in low complex areas. For instance, at a regular job, and a regular job that takes into account a person's skills. And that can be in different areas. Average person, let's say Henk and Ingrid, what happens with them? What you see is that in a knowledge-based economy, the grid tends up to go more towards the upper right side. So, Henk and Ingrid have to move up too. That's complex. And we have to take that in account. So, averagely, you probably see that in our society of low and high complexity, you need a certain level of skills just to be average. But when it's evolving, the fields and the panels are changing. So you have to adjust to that. You see the knowledge-based economy coming up. You see also that automation, so people that are not necessary anymore because we arrange it not manually anymore but by computers. But you also see outsourcing coming up. Outsourcing to, for instance, Pakistan or India, but also getting other groups to Friesland, for example. So we are getting other groups like Eastern European people to do some work. You get some outsourcing and you see automation. In our province, in Friesland, we don't have that much highly educated people. We have a lot of them, but a lot of them go to Amsterdam or go internationally. Not all those people are staying here. And the level of ambition is not always that high. And that's a threat. That's a real threat. Because what happens if the grid moves up and you're somewhere in the lower regions of the grid and you can't cope anymore with the complexity and your education is just not enough? What's poverty then? Well, I can say that in the right upside, you see a lot of challenges because it's getting more interested. Take, for example, water technology. Friesland wants to be the best at water technology, and we expect that that hub, water technology, will be our future savior. So our contribution to the knowledge-based economy is also creating a water campus, creating a place where people can join and to create jobs, to create knowledge, to create applications in the sector of water technology, a new sector. Lots of challenges for the right upper side. If you're like really high skilled, but working under level, so that means that you're choosing an environment that's not very complicated, that means that you can have frustration. Also here in Friesland, we see the numbers of people working under their level are higher than in other regions. And we have to take that into account, because what happens if you're frustrated? Well, sometimes you can cope with it by getting a more complex environment, or you do something else, but you can also move. And we don't want that to happen, especially not if you really are taking a knowledge-based economy seriously. But there's also poverty in this grid. And the poverty is on the right, lower side of the grid. Think about it, that you don't have that much skills. You see Leeuwarden and Friesland moving up to the right upper side, and you're still down there. What do we have to do about that? Poverty, as I stated, is also participation, is also being a part of the knowledge-based economy. So, we have the right lower grid. What do we have to do for that kind of person? And I really want to get into it with you, because I need you to help this society by getting that problem, getting focus on that problem and doing something about that problem. First of all, you can see if people who are in that grid can maybe move to another part of the grid. And you can do that by different stuff. You can do it by job carving. Complex jobs, making them a bit more handable, making them a bit more practical, helping people to cope with jobs in that complexity. So we need thinkers to do that. The thinkers that are in the right upper grid and that refuse to go for Eastern Europeans to get them in, but they see a lot of talent over here in this province, and they're really taking them into account to do something about it. Just participation, getting them to participate. Another thing is that we can create an area for them. We do that in the social working places. The social working places where people are working in a protected area, and they are like filling cups, and they are doing a low complexity work, but they are posted outside of regular society. So they are like in a whole different place, and we created that for them. And it's a bit more, a little less complex, and a lot of people cope in that kind of environment. But better yet is to keep them linked to the knowledge-based economy, because we don't know where it will evolve, and it's very worthwhile to stick with those people and getting them and moving them into and keeping them connected to the economy, like we do with Henk and Ingrid, because they also need to do that. Another way, that is to add more skills, improve skills. That's not always necessary. That's not always education. It's also teaming up with them. If you're, for instance, in the right upper grid and you have a lot of skills and are very challenged and happy and working on the water technology here in Friesland, try and look around if you might be able to team up with someone who finds it complicated in this society and who maybe needs a buddy. So it's not always just creating a university campus or going to higher vocational training, but it's also sometimes just knowledge transmission between the people who live already here, because you are a resource, they are a resource, and we all should stick together in this society. If we focus on that side and on that side, we might be able to get the people who living in the complex society and cannot cope with them and are, in my definition, poor. We can try to move them up a bit more in the middle where Henk and Ingrid are. And we might be able to, by looking at the complexity of society and by looking at the skills we have, we can maybe help them a bit. But we have to team up. So my statement is that poverty was begging in Java, as I told, getting in contact with other classes of people. That was in the basis very important to do there. Here in Holland, we see that we now look at the individual and we look in what's the level of participation of that person, and is the person connected to the economy in order to participate in the economy, because you see that people want to participate. They don't want to sit at home. Some do, but most of them don't want to sit at home. They want to participate, they want to meet friends, they want to get out. So that's the challenge we are here for. The poverty is not 83 euros and giving them 83 euros and that's it. The challenge is more. It's also about the complexity, and it's also about the knowledge, especially the coming 20 years here in Friesland, where we tend to focus on the right upside, and we are very warm about water technology, and we love it, and we want to make green jobs, and we look at all the challenges around us, and we love it, and oh, great. Social innovation and all that stuff. And those people who are doing that are doing an excellent job. But we need more than that. And we need focus on the poverty that's there as well. So what is this person over here? Münchhausen. Münchhausen is the count that was living for a while in Latvia. And 50 miles away from Riga, he had this estate. And the Turkish invaded the Baltic states. And he had to run away everywhere, because they were hunting him, and well, he had a lot of ideas, and they were a bit strange too. So once he escaped from the Turkish, and then he fell into a swamp. And while he was drowning, he grabbed his own hair and pulled himself out of that swamp. And that's how he got saved. So it's a quite creative guy, and a quite amazing guy too, and also a quite inspiring guy too, because he has like 50 of those stories. And somehow, people didn't really believe, of course, that he pulled himself by his own hair, but they got inspired because he did the crazy things and he thought about crazy things. And then he made a story out of it, and people listened to him and got inspired. And in no time, he had groups around him who were inspired by him, but who could actually do stuff. Here in Holland, here in Leeuwarden, we also have a Münchhausen group. A Münchhausen group, and they're really practical because they come together. And once every 2 months or 3 months, and they challenge each other. I have a person, and he's homeless, and you have a home, and there's someone here who knows something about education, and another one who knows something about money. Maybe someone has a job in the future, and we're helping this guy. And they do it besides their jobs, because they find it as an extra important. And I want a Münchhausen group getting connected together, but also to the poverty group that I defined here for you. I want a Münchhausen group in this theme, in the theme of a knowledge economy, and in the theme of this evolution of the knowledge economy. What do we have to do with each other? What do I have to do here in the municipality? What does someone who rents houses has to do? What does someone who starts a business at the water campus have to do? Maybe nothing, but well, we can at least try a little bit to reduce the poverty over there and getting people more connected with our knowledge economy, because that's my biggest challenge for the coming 20 years. Thank you very much.